All right. So today we're going to talk about the customer journey, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. I love this topic because it's something that people don't think about enough. And sometimes we get to wanting to just make money that we don't think about the full customer journey. And there's a couple reasons why this is important, and I'm going to share that with you as we go through this presentation. So everybody can see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'll just put one person. Okay. So the best way to map your customer journey. So getting into the minds of your customer is a real big challenge, right? I mean, think about this. Sometimes it's not a challenge because we don't know necessarily what they're thinking. It's a challenge because we think we know what they're thinking, right? And we go into building a business and we automatically assume that we know what our customer wants, what their needs are, and how we should address them. And more often than not, we're actually wrong, right? So this brings you to the customer journey. And what you want to try to do is understand the funnel that they go through and each point of interaction. And so as many of you know, there's many different types of funnels. I like to keep it simple to the 4: awareness, interest, decision, and then the sale, right? And the reason why I like to keep it simple is because everything is about simplicity. So this is the type of funnel that we've been working on, and we're more focused right now on this top piece, right? Awareness and interest, right? So many of you are up here trying to build your funnels up here. It's really down here where we're going to have to bring some of you, right? So I think Sharon, for instance, you're down here working on this part of the funnel, where Duno, you're up here in the awareness, right? So just to give 2 examples. So each part of this funnel has to be worked on, but at the same time, understanding the complexities between all of the different points is really important. And sometimes it's going to be a much longer cycle. Like somebody like Elizabeth has a very high ticket service, so that funnel is going to be much longer, where somebody like Sharon might not be as long as somebody like Elizabeth, right? So each of you have a different funnel, right? But whatever the reason is of what your funnel is, the route that you need to make and get an understanding for is the customer journey, right? But what exactly is it? So what is a customer journey? A lot of you know what it is, but I don't know that many of you know how to actually map it out. So the customer journey is a process by which a customer interacts with your company to achieve a goal. That goal could be to learn something, that goal could be to buy something, that goal could be whatever that goal is. There's many different types of goals that it could be. So what's the best way to understand the journey? You guessed it, mapping it out, right? So understanding and mapping out the different parts of the journey. But here's the thing, it's not just about mapping out, okay, they get an email or they get a, X, Y, and Z. It's also mapping out the emotion. And a lot of times we forget about that important piece of emotion. It's a really important part. So why is this important? So the first thing is you get to know your target audience. A lot of you are going through the process right now of doing the Dream Buyer exercise. And we spend a lot of time in the beginning part of this course in the personal branding section. And to be honest with you, that wasn't always the case when we launched this course, but it has turned into a really beginning process of building the company became bigger and bigger, and more people kept spending more and more time. And it's because the getting to know your target audience is so important, right? But the reason why we want to map out the full journey is because you don't want to spend 3 to 6 months mapping out your customer journey. You want to just get going. And here's the thing, your customer journey is going to change, right? So what I like to say is speed of implementation. You want to get to know your target audience, of course, to make sure you're putting something out correctly and you are putting something out, but you also want to make sure you put something out, right? So while this is important to understand your target audience, you also want to make sure that you are moving quickly, right? And that's an important point I just wanted to make sure to say. The second thing is you're creating an inbound first marketing model. What does this mean? How many of you right now are fighting for customers? How many of you are going out and finding customers, right? Of course, in the beginning of your journey, you're going to have to do that. That is part of the process. That is what you have to do to build a business. But eventually you want to get to the point where you just have leads coming to you, right? So for my account, for instance, in the beginning, yes, I was the one going out trying to find people, but now people are coming in and finding me. Right. So I see Emily popped in, right? So Emily, right now, you're going to have to build a model to find people to want to be in your spin program. But eventually you're going to build a model where it's inbound first, meaning people are coming to you. And that's when you have people coming to you, that's when you know you have the right customer journey, right? So that's an important thing. And then you want to adapt a customer-centric strategy. So many times, how many times have you guys heard me say, you guys have low-hanging fruit that are dropping through the cracks, right? And that are slipping right through because you're not organized. This is why I spend so much time teaching you guys the processes that I use to make sure nobody slips through the cracks. Follow-up is the most important thing. Sometimes in a customer journey, it's not the best program that wins. It's the person that has the best follow-up that wins, right? So developing that customer-centric strategy is so important. And it's important to develop a model where you are able to treat everybody like gold and really give them that feeling that they are the number one person. And how do you create that feeling? By actually making them the number one person. Because you can't be fake about it. The only way that you could win is by developing a system that creates a customer-centric strategy that makes people feel like they're on top of the world, right? So a really important piece that's very hard to do. So most mapping starts with an Excel spreadsheet that outlines the following: the key events, the customer motivations, and the areas of friction, right, within the user experience. You're never going to create a customer journey that's so perfect, and it's always going to have to change. But being able to map this out is incredibly important. So not so that you can create a better customer journey, but so you can understand all of the areas of friction so that you can fix that. Right. And it's okay to have areas of friction. Sometimes areas of friction can actually cause for more interest. So it doesn't necessarily mean that an area of friction is a bad thing, right? So once all of this information is combined into a comprehensive plan and a visual, this should be the average experience with your business, right? And that is essentially what a customer journey is. By understanding this relationship, you can structure all the different touch points that creates the most effective and efficient process for your customers. So a customer journey that's mapped out from the first to the final touch point is so critical to understand for you to reach your goals as well as your customers. So let's talk a little bit more about this. So there are 5 main steps in order to create this, and there is a template that I will give you guys in addition to have you guys be able to map out your own journeys, right? And before I go into the 5 steps, in order to really think through when you should do this piece, this is really a good part to do at the end of module 2. So I'm going to plop this in right after you finish your hook, your story, your offer. That's when you want to start thinking through your customer journey before you start getting into your sales funnel. Now, this is not a 3, 4, 5 week process. This should be literally a couple hours where you map everything out. And some of it you might be guessing because some of you haven't actually gone through the customer journey. And so some of it is you figuring out, okay, I need to kind of guess here a little bit and then alter it as I go. And keep in mind, again, it's going to be a continuous process. And the customer journey mapping looks very different from company to company. So all of your journeys are going to look very different. Your customers, your products, your services, all of the resources that are available are going to influence what this process looks like. And so while every map does look different, there are some fundamental systematic steps that you can take to start with why you need a map in the first place, right? So step 1, you want to set a clear objective for the map. Why are you even doing this, right? So you have to be able to answer the question of why. And at this point, when you start to create this, you should already know the question why, because we've already developed your vision statement. We already know why you're doing this, right? So why are you doing this? And this might seem like a trick question, but after all, if you think about the bulleted list of why you should care, the few slides back, that's really your why. But now we're looking at those reasonings and digging a little deeper, right? So what you are hoping to accomplish by mapping this journey out. So what's the objective, right? Which is you want to improve the customer journey and dig deeper into that why, right? So by thinking about the behavior and the importance of the customer journey, it'll make you understand why this is important. It could be to boost sales. It could be to increase your conversion. It could be to understand your customer better. It could be whatever the objective is. It's important to have some sort of objective. So in this Excel that I'm going to give you guys on the top, you want to have what the objective is. Right. So Emily's might be objective to, create the first 500 customers for our spin class. Duno might be to get 30 leads a month for my TikTok business, whatever it is. Right. Boom. If you're thinking about the master classes that you have, right? You might be thinking, okay, so we want to max out our master classes every single week, right? So whatever it is, right? So these are the types of objectives that you want to have, right? So the first thing you need to think about is the why, right? And the objective, okay? The second thing that you want to do is you want to create a customer persona. And at this point, you should already have this. So this should be a breeze for all of you because you've already spent the time doing this. So your persona is a fictional representation of your ideal customer, including the demographics, the psychographics, all of that. So I actually like naming my avatar sometimes. Like my avatar it's actually ironic because it's Susie, who actually happens to be one of our students. And I always named my avatar Susie. And then I met Susie and I'm like, Susie, you are literally my avatar I've been naming for the last 5 years of my life. And it was so funny when I met her because she literally was kind of what I pictured my avatar to be. So my avatar actually came true and ended up being a real live person. So most of you should have already created this. So you could take a step back and outline what you already did in the Dream Buyer exercise. But it's important to reiterate. It's repetition is important. You'll notice that some of the things that we do, there's a lot of overlap. And by the time you get down to a module, something like this is now pulling it all together. Right? So all of the things that you did in the previous lessons are now being pulled together by this. And so it starts to make sense. And sometimes you're like, why are they making me do this? But then when you get to this and you're like, oh, okay, it's making sense now. This is why she's having us do this, right? So here's some questions that you want to address, right? So when you're thinking about your persona, and there's Sally, Ed, and Jerry, right? These are the questions you want to think. What are their job titles, their responsibility? Where are they located? What hobbies, activities? What organizations do they partake in? Are they decision makers? Are they buying your product? How are they decision makers? What challenges are they facing? What solutions have they tried to solve? What else? What are they interested in learning from you? What are important factors of making a decision, right? So these are all things that you want to understand. And you'll have a few customer personas. You're not going to only have one, but you can't, unfortunately, you can't target all of them, especially in the beginning. Each persona will have a little bit of a different customer journey, depending on who they are, their budgets, constraints, the problems that they're facing, the solutions that they've tried. But now's the time to understand and identify the personas relevant to the customer journey that you're creating. So start with one persona, and eventually you can map out several journeys. So at this point, I had 3 or 4 different journeys, right? And so start with one, establish a targeted persona for one person. And then as you grow, you can expand that out, right? So this is what it would look like. So you would just put target persona. Again, I like to name them. So put Emma or whoever. I think it's cool to name them. And that is where you would put in line 2. So your target persona, who are you looking for? Again, you might have multiple different target personas. For this mapping, you'll do 1. Okay. Then the third thing that you want to do is map out according to the customer life cycle phases. And so again, this is going to change brand to brand, but customers tend to follow similar processes no matter what your process is. So no matter if you're doing spin or if you're doing, dance master classes, or if you're doing TikTok coaching, whatever it is, or if you're, God bless you. If you're doing, personal training or what have you, everybody goes through the 4 phases of awareness, research, consideration, purchase. That's typically what people do, right? So awareness, discovering your brand and solutions you provide. So this is the beginning of the funnel. This is when people are just starting to learn about you. Research, this is the part where people are starting to learn more about your business, what you have to offer, and determine if you're the right solution. A lot of times, this is the time when they're going through competitors and seeing what makes you different than other people in the marketplace, right? Why should I go with T? Why should I let him be the one to help me lose weight, right? Well, because you can Voxer him at any time of the day and he's going to respond, right? And stop you from eating that donut. So that's an example, right? So this is the part where they're going to do their research to figure out who's the person I want to go with. And then once they get past that, they're going to go to the consideration phase. This is when they're comparing you with all the other solutions, not just competitors. This is everything, right? So maybe it's they sign up to the gym instead, or maybe they are going to, get a spin bike, or, what have you, right? So there's a lot of different solutions. This is the part where they're really strongly considering going with you. Then you have the purchase phase, that's when they decide whether or not they're going to go with you. And this might be at the point where you have a phone conversation with them, or you have some sort of interaction with them face to face, right? So what you want to do is ask the question, what does the customer need at this point? What are the questions that they are asking, right? So what solutions are on the market? What is the best solution for my problem? Who can offer the best solution? How do I buy, right? Then you want to understand their goals, right? So at each point you want to understand, okay, what's the point of awareness? To get them to notice your brand. What's the point of research? To provide information to make you stand out. This is your mission. This is your hook. This is your story. This is when this starts to become important. Consideration. Now it's time for you to prove you're the best. You don't necessarily have to prove you're the best in the beginning. You just have to capture their attention. Once you capture their attention, then you want to tell them what your solution is. Then once you tell them what your solution is, like, oh yeah, I need that. Now it's your time to prove that you're the best. That's when you tell your story. That's when you hit, like Sharon has an amazing story of why she loves to write, right? And that story captivated me. When she told me that story, it gave me chills. That's when you want to share that story, right? Because then people are like, I want to work with her. I don't want to work with anyone else. Then the last is you want to create a smooth purchasing process. You do not want to make it complicated. Here's a link, go buy. Like, you do not want to complicate things. The fourth step that you want to do is you want to list out all of the touch points throughout the journey. And the reason why this is important is because this is where you're going to understand where there could be friction. So if you have a question above and your touch points do not answer those, that's when you can start to understand if there's major friction, or if you're not giving the customer what they want at certain points of the customer journey. So a touch point is any place where your customer engages. This could be your website, email marketing. This could be social media. It could be review sites, right? So sometimes things that aren't in your control are actually part of the customer journey. And it could be any way that they research you, learn about you, or they get in touch with you or have interaction with you. And there's going to be a number of different touch points between your brand and your customer, but not all of them will be necessarily relevant to each part of this, right? So I like to sometimes off on the side put other touch points that aren't included in the 4 journeys to get a full picture of all the different touch points. So different touch points typically do go in different parts of the customer journey. So for example, customer journey, when you're looking at the awareness phase, a lot of times that's going to be social media. That's going to be a part where you're really bringing people in and making them aware of your brand, right? Where customer reviews is probably going to be more in the consideration phase. So once they decide they want to actually buy from you, they might start doing more research about the consideration phase and exactly, seeing what other people think of you, right? And so by mapping these out and breaking it down, you start to understand what the different touch points are and how it's impacting them or deterring them from buying from you, right? So a really important part. So this is where you would actually put the touch points right here, okay? So you can see this bottom piece here. You'd actually put out exactly what they say. Now, what you want to do is you want to give some context, right? So once you actually have the touch points, then you want to give it a little bit more information. So what is the customer actually doing at this stage? What might they be thinking or feeling at this stage? Think about more of the emotional side of it. And actually, I realize that it's down here. I just didn't pull this up enough, but there is another line that says emotion. So what's the emotion that they're feeling, right? And then the fifth is you want to identify the elements you want your map to show. So there's a point where you have the elements and the touch points, but they might not be touch points that you actually want. So for instance, if you have reviews that are not very friendly, and that's going to happen, guys, at the end of the day, people that are not happy are more likely to give a review than people that are happy, right? I know that for us, it's hard to get people to give testimonials in general, right? So not just for passion, but in general, it's very hard to get people to give testimonials because it requires work, it requires, X, Y, and Z. So typically we have to give away something in order to get something in return, which is how we've always done it in every business that I've had. But I've worked a lot in my career on doing customer relationship management, and a large part of that is working on review sites. So we would have to have clients and entice them to go leave positive reviews to try to get the negative reviews out, right? And so a large part of my career was working with major 8, 9, 10-figure businesses to help them fix their brand out in the marketplace, right? Because people care. But you get more people that want to write negative stuff than positive. So how do you fix that? You've got to kind of trick the system a little bit, right? Or you've got to change the customer journey to make them love you so much that they don't even worry about the reviews. So how we've done that with some of our customers and clients is by providing them the testimonials themselves. And so sometimes that deters them from actually going and doing the research. And the other way is to, create their customer journey in a way that's so prescribed that they don't go off and do it themselves, right? So again, it's a really important part, and sometimes you got to address it, right? So I had a customer, a client that had a huge social media shitstorm. Like, it was so bad. It was, they just had everybody being negative about them, about specific topics. And it was really rough. So what we did was change the narrative and started putting out, here's what we have done and here's what we are doing. And we started to change the narrative and change the customer journey, right? And so what we would do is get ahead of it by developing content about what we are doing, and more positivity, right? So if we didn't know the customer journey and at what point, we wouldn't have known at what point would that impact. It also includes part of your customer journey are post purchase too, right? And the journey that they take as well, because clients are just as important, if not more important, than your leads, right? Because they're the ones that are going to sell your product. They're the ones that are going to promote you. They're the ones that might repurchase from you again. So that part is even more important than anything else. So understanding that piece is important too. So the last step and the most important piece is you want to actually take the journey yourself. And a lot of people don't do this. So go through an entire journey that your customers go through and look at what the flaws are and understand the good things and the bad things. So that is what I have today. And I'm happy to kind of open this up and answer any questions. Did I drop the mic?